What's up, dudes? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we are theorizing a country called Vatican City. You already know the drill? Let's dissect the flag. The Vatican City flag makes a lot of symbols. The white represents peace, and the yellow represents that it has its own religion, Roman Catholicism. And the symbol represents that, and the top is the Pope's hat. And it's a fancy hat because things are about to get messy. Here's the coat arms of Vatican City, and it's surrounded not only in Italy, but in the city of Rome itself. It is the smallest country in the world to exist right now. And the Vatican Opera taken from Egypt to all the way here, which is in the view of St. Peter's Square in the Malgradio's Dome, and the entire history of the St. Peter's Cathedral, or St. Peter's Basilica, speaking in Italian. And once it was big already. In 1796, it formed the Papal States. In the 1800s, that the Kingdom of Sardinia took over them and formed the Kingdom of Italy. In 1944, and British Army so radiated running parade from St. Peter's Basilica all around, and map of Vatican City and the territory itself from Italy, and it declared independence from Italy in the 1940s. And this is the current Pope of here, Pope Francis, who was born in Argentina, but moved to Italy for a much deeper reason. And guards are going strong. They have their own police station, their palace and government, their own city, and even parking lots. What? And even look inside of a St. Peter's Basilica. So beautiful and misty. Feels like an old church. But yes, it is an old church. However, the capital and largest city is, you guessed it, Vatican City. And their official language is Italian, and their religion is mostly Roman Catholicism, and their sovereign entity is the Holy See. And their sovereign is a pope named Francis, and the Secretary of State named President of the Government, yeah, I can't speak Italian, you gotta help me. And it signed the Vatican Treaty on February 11th, 1929, just over 92 years ago. And the area is 49 kilometers, making it last place. Almost dead last. And their population is 455, making it 240th in this. Dang, that's small. And their currency is euro, and their driving zone is right, and it has its own license plate. But geez, man, Vatican City is small, but let's do something big. And it's my favorite election to look at is the election of the messed up election of 1824. This is going to take long because it's messed up. So basically, if you don't have any patience, don't watch this video. But anyway, let's do this. The 20th presidential election in American history took place from Tuesday, October 26th to Thursday, December 2nd, 1824. It's one of my favorite elections to look at. It's because it was so unusual and fascinating. First of all, it was important to note that this was the first election in which white men came out in droves to vote. It's only that rich white men could vote in elections, but more and more laws have been made it so that poor white men could vote because property ownership was no longer a requirement. So remember later on. Okay, so James Monroe had a really smooth 10 years president and decided not to seek a third term, keeping the two-term tradition. His vice president, Daniel T. Tompkins, was lucky to be re-elected by 1820 because a lot of fellow Democrat Republicans didn't like him. In 1824, he was still in no shape to run because they still didn't like him. He had mismanaged his money and had a horrible debt, and he suffered from alcoholism and just overall poor health. Tragedy. He died just 3 months after leaving office. There was still one major political party at the time, the Democrat-Republican Party, yet there was the power vacuum within the party. Because of this, a flood of candidates rushed in, all wanting to be president. This election was being more about each candidate's personality. The primary election caucus of today within political parties to get their nominees. That basically was, except they can agree who will be nominated and therefore president. There were originally 6 candidates. There was... I forgot a word, sorry. Let's just redo it, shall we? Sorry for this. Okay, let's just... And agree on most of the major issues. Think of the primary elections of caucuses today of get their nominee. That's basically what this presidential election was, except they couldn't agree on who would be nominated for president. There were 6 Democrat-Republican candidates who stood up. However, 2 soon realized they didn't much a chance. Smith Thompson, the Secretary of Navy from New York, quickly withdrew the race. Next up was John Calhoun, the Secretary of War from South Carolina, withdrew soon as Thompson. There was 4 other candidates that stick it out. William H. Crawford, U.S. Secretary from Georgia, Treasury from Georgia, had actually been nominated by caucus of minority, the Democrat-Republican members of the U.S. Congress. However, the rest of Congress viewed this caucus as elitist and undemocratic, so they ignored it. Next up was Henry Clay, the well-known and well-respected Speaker of the House from Kentucky. He probably perceived his party's trust the nomination if he wanted it, but voted in the best way to elect a candidate. There was John Quincy Adams, oldest son of former President John Adams and U.S. Secretary of State from Massachusetts. Adams had to support from many former Federalists. Finally, there was Andrew Jackson, the War of 1812 military hero, former governor and senator from Tennessee. Many Americans viewed Jackson as the champion of the, quote, common man. Like I said, this exception many disagreements over tariffs and government's role with infrastructure. These candidates agreed with most issues of this election. It was about personality and supporting candidates voters who read most. It was also a very regional election. Crawford had support in parts of the East. Clay had support in the West. Adams supports in the Northeast. And Jackson had support pretty much all over. Because this election was contested, there was heavy campaigning on all sides, with the exception of Crawford, who suffered a stroke due to a bad subscription. You heard that, Brad. However, back then candidates usually sat in the sidelines while their supporters did most of the campaigning. In addition to the usual forms of campaigning, a bunch of parody songs popped up to support candidates. Most normally, Hunters of Kentucky, a parody song, The Unfortunate Miss Bailey, Leora Yankovic would be so proud. Did I mention vice president candidates? There were a lot. Originally had Albert Gretchen, former minister to France, nominated President Caucus that didn't count. As it turns out, the one to be vice president anyway. Official nominee was Nephew Stanford, senator from New York, Nephew McKeon, senator from North Carolina, Martin Van Buren, senator from New York, and aforementioned John C. Calhoun, Henry Clay, and Andrew Jackson. And here are the results. Well, the results were inconclusive. There was no clear winner. Andrew Jackson received 99 electoral votes, more electoral votes than any other candidate, but he did not receive the majority of electoral votes needed to win the election, which was 131. John Quincy Adams came in second place with 84 electoral votes. Crawford third came in 41. Clay fourth with 37. John C. Calhoun became the 7th vice president in American history after receiving 182 electoral votes. Good thing he dropped out of presidential race, you know what I'm saying? But who will be president? Well, the answer was in the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, which said the House of Representatives has to decide if to be president if no candidate received the majority of electoral votes. According to the 12th Amendment, considered and left out Henry Clay. Jackson, Adams, Crawford remain. Remember, Henry Clay was Speaker of the House and extremely influential in Congress. Oh, and Clay hated Andrew Jackson. In January 1825, he told his friend, quote, "I cannot believe killing 2,500 Englishmen in New Orleans qualifies for various difficulties and complicated duties of a chief majesty." Clay used his influence to convince more people to vote for Adams instead of Jackson, who agreed on most of the issues. When the House voted on February 9, 1825, John Quincy Adams was the winner, becoming the 6th president and the first of 2 presidents who was the son of a former president, the other being George W. Bush. Andrew Jackson and his supporters were shocked. After all, not only did Jackson receive the most electoral votes, but he did receive the most votes total with 41.4% of the popular vote, comparing Adams to 30.9%. It was the first and only presidential election in which a candidate who received most of the electoral votes did not become president, and first of 5 presidential elections in which a candidate who received the most popular vote did not become president. After this election, Clay struck a deal with Adams, in which Clay will be his Secretary of State prior to becoming president. Sure enough, after Adams was elected, he appointed Clay his Secretary of State. Jackson and his supporters were enraged, calling the apparent deal between John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay a, quote, corrupt bargain. While Clay denied the charges, the damage was already done. The so-called corrupt bargain would haunt Adams' presidency for the next 4 years. And that's it for the video. Sorry it took you up long. It took 14 minutes exact. So, thank you for watching this video. Hope you have an amazing day, a great day, and I'll see you next week.